The Air Max 90 Fresh of celebrating its 30th anniversary year last year is keeping it going. There have been an absolute ton of really class Air Max 90s in the first 6 months of 2021, and they continue with this shoe. And before I get into anything, I'm going to dispel a myth that I think is out there. A lot of people are calling these the athletic shoe or the sports shoe and stuff like that. I'm going right to the bones of it, and I'm saying this is the football shoe. I've seen it called the Black Football, the Air Max 90 Black Football. And the reason I'm thinking that is because of this right here. Boing, there is a picture, a nice close-up picture that shows you the two most important things that will play a part in this video. And what we're talking about is the texture that gives you the grip on an American football, so that when the quarterback throws it, he's got control over it, but also the laces that run up the side of it. And also that's a big part in the quarterback having control over the ball. And it's because of that I think this isn't just about general sports. I think that's what some people are saying out there. I think that's what some sites and social media people are saying, that this is general sports that cover a lot of ball sports like American football and basketball, for example. But I'm going with just American football. I think this is the Nike Air Max 90 Black Football, period, and we're done with it. So that's a little myth to dispel because of that picture there. Back to the shoe today, and you can see hopefully just a little hint that up on the tongue there's something going on, and on the swoosh there's something going on. And we'll get into those details in today's video, and we'll also get into the details about the materials used on the shoe, because there's interesting stuff going on there as well. And then there's a couple of places where they've made some design choices that I do and don't agree with. With that being said, let's just get into this and have a close-up look at the upcoming release of the Nike Air Max 90 Black Football. This is the Tokyo Bara 23 Secret Channel. Tokyo Bara 23 Secret Channel です。毎日アップするので毎日見てください. And every single day from Tokyo, Japan, I bring you content about upcoming sneaker releases, sneaker news, sneaker reviews. And in the spotlight today is the upcoming release on June 1st of the Air Max 90 Black Football. A great looking shoe on its own without the football stuff in there. If it was just a straight up colorway with a lot of black, like an awful lot of black in the shoe, and then the orange hits on it, that'll be fine, especially when you look at the materials, because there's not one, it's not two, but there's actually three materials going on in the upper, and then you've got some great hits throughout the rest of the shoe. So with that being said, we're going to get into it today and have a look at this shoe and go through it bit by bit and look at some of the detailing on it. But before we do that, I have a little tip for you guys out there, and I picked this tip up from Dunks. And the thing is, and maybe, you know, it's when you're looking at pictures, and I'll throw the picture that I'm talking about right now. I'll ask you before I get to this, what do you think? Do you think that's the medial side or the lateral side? The outside being the lateral, the inside being the medial. And there's only a few ways to tell with certain shoes, because they're so parallel that the medial and the lateral sides look very, very similar. But I've got a little trick that helps you out to know whether it's the medial and lateral side with Nike Air Max 90s. And what I'm talking about is the little valleys that appear right down low on the midsole, where the outsole wraps up onto the midsole. And if there's two of those valleys, those little dimples that hopefully I'm zoomed in on somehow on the green screen behind me here, that's the lateral side. And then when we look at what we're looking at right now, and you see there's just one of those valleys, that gives it away that that's the medial side. So some of the sites are there, the official images, stuff like that, throwing people off a little bit because they think what they're looking at as the lateral side. Turns out it's the actual medial side, and that's a quick way to spot that. It's similar with the Dunk lows. When you look at the way the midsole and the outsole sort of integrate together, you can see the difference between the medial and the lateral sides very quickly. So a little tip for you guys out there, quick way to know if it's a medial or lateral side on the Air Max 90s. And with that being said, we might as well get into the shoe. And you know what I think I'll do is, I wasn't planning to do this, but I'll actually start right there with those valleys, because there's two really important things going on there. One is the all orange outsole on these guys. So if we flip it upside down and have a look at that all orange outsole, you can see there's not a single color anywhere else on the bottom of this shoe. And that's interesting because recently there's been a few shoes, especially from the Air Max line, and especially Air Max 1s and 90s, that have thrown in the odd little color, little corner of color here, a little corner of color there in their outsoles. But not today. Today it's just that all solid orange, not gum sole, orange front to back, covering the entire length of the shoe. And right above that, sandwiched between the outsole and the upper, is the white midsole, and it's equally all white. Now that usually doesn't mean too much when it comes to sneakers, but in the case of Air Max 90s, it's a big deal when you get to the air unit at the back, and I call it an arrowhead air unit because of the area around the air unit. The air unit itself is very standard, thin window looking into the midsole, but around it you've got a kind of arrowhead feel to the air unit on there, and sometimes they play with the colouring on that, like a white midsole, but the air unit is blue, black, green, whatever. But in the case of today's shoe, it's all white front to back, so it's a little point of detail that's worth knowing about these Air Max 90s. And then we get up onto the upper, and there's just so much to talk about in terms of the materials on these guys. So what I think I'll do first is the base materials, and we'll look to the toe to zoom in on there and see what we're talking about. I have two guarantees for you and one question that I think I'm right on. And the guarantees are the highest and the lowest parts of the shoe, and what I'm talking about there is the mudguard that comes up from the side. Because it's such a black shoe, it's actually quite difficult to tell that that's patent leather on there, and that's very unusual on Air Max 90s. You don't usually see patent leather there with that glossy feel to it, which is interesting because tomorrow's shoe, now that I think about it, is the Vapor Max 2021 Fly Knit Triple Black, and that's a very matte finish to that triple black, and the black base on this shoe is the foundation of it is in that glossy patent leather on the bottom end of the shoe and the mudguard. So it's interesting, that sort of comparison between today and tomorrow's shoe. And then the other thing is to get up onto the toe and have a real close-up look at the materials of the panel up there, which is also the same material that you see up around the ankle. And what we're talking about is mesh on there, but still in black, because it's very black sneaker except for the swoosh, which we'll get to in a minute. But then the question I have for you is what lies between those two. You've got the mesh on the toe box. In the panel up there, you've got the glossy finish of the patent leather down on the mudguard, and then between the two of those you've got the overlays, and I'm going with black suede, and that again is unusual to see on an Air Max 90, especially when it's offset with mesh and patent leather. This combination of leathers and materials in the upper is quite unusual, and it's one of the most important features of this particular shoe. But a more important feature than that perhaps is going back to the swooshes and seeing what's going on there. Now we get into that American football vibe that's going on, and this is the bit that's throwing people, because a lot of people are looking at this and saying basketball, and I'm totally disagreeing. I'm saying I think this is just pure American football, not sports in general. And if you look at this swoosh here, and it's also the same swoosh on the medial side, there's no difference between the two sides of the shoe and the swooshes and the designs in those sort of browns and leather browns that give you that feel of an American football. And then if you go up from that, the second really big hit of detailing on this shoe is up on the tongues, where you see a very big nod to the American football in the laces up there that I described earlier, about them having a big part to play with the quarterback maintaining control of the ball. And so up on the tongues, up on there, you see the detailing on there with the orange representing the leather of the ball, the white representing the laces of the ball, and then over the top of all that, a black swoosh that's all replacing the standard Air Max branding on there. A nice little detail to look at while we're up there is if you go back and have a look on the insoles. Often with Nike shoes, what you'll see is identical insoles, identical insoles left and right, and they do look identical. But then when you actually think about it, one of the brandings is inverted compared to the other one, flipped around 180 degrees, and it's kind of a neat little detail, that white branding on the orange insole. But speaking of neat little details, there aren't any on the heel, and I was a bit disappointed to see the heel with very simple branding on the back, white branding on a black panel. I was expecting to see a little bit more back there in terms of the sort of American football vibe, the orange vibe, the textures that you see on the swoosh, and up there at the top of the tongues I thought, you know what, maybe there'll be a bit more to go onto that shoe and to go into the back end of them. So very simple white and black, or white on black branding on the back of these guys in your standard Nike Air Max 90 style and sort of branding panel on the back there, which is very distinctive, as Nike branding goes, but I was looking for just a little bit more, if you ask me. And then I think the last thing I'll quickly have a look at is just on the lateral side, the Air Max window that you usually see just sitting below the swoosh is in black on black to give it that complete black effect. I talked about the midsoles and how sometimes that's a place where they play with colours, and this panel is another place where sometimes, and again, you could have seen an orange Air Max in that black window there, but I actually agree with the black on black, because the upper needs that consistency to let the orange pop off of the leathers that look like the American football. So I'm happy with the black on black in that little window, but could have done with a bit more than the white on black on the heel branding. And with that being said, it's pretty much wrapping up the shoe. So June the 1st is the drop date for these guys. A great looking shoe, Air Max 90s, now into their 31st year, and they're not slowing down. One of the most iconic silhouettes of all time. Absolute legendary silhouette that was hot 31 years ago and has maintained its like stance at the top of the sneaker game for 31 years and doesn't look like it's going anywhere. Great shoe, great silhouette. Great job, Nike. And with that being said, it's time to just wrap this one up and finish up another video for the day. So we're still getting that consistent daily content churning out every single day, not missing a beat at the moment. And fingers crossed we can keep on going, not too far away from 1,000 days of consecutive content on YouTube. So fingers crossed we keep that going. And the way I get to keep that going is because I do this every single day. And that means you are guaranteed to see me tomorrow.